Hi, my name is Ron O'Connell and I'll be your trainer in this training video. In this training video, we're going to do an overview of AD Connect. We're going to do a brief overview. What is AD Connect? We're going to deploy AD to a DC in the portal. And of course, we're going to install AD Connect on that DC and sync to Azure AD. So what we need is an AD subscription. If you don't have one, create one. It's free. You need a Windows Server 2012 with Active Directory installed on it, a domain controller /DC. AD Connect must be installed on a domain joined Windows Server 2012 or later. Important note, you cannot use AD Connect on Windows SBS Server or Windows Core. It's not supported. AD Connect server needs DNS resolution for both intranet and internet. The DNS server must be able to resolve names both on your Prem Active Directory and to the Azure endpoints. Azure AD Connect requires network connectivity to all configured domains. You will need an Azure admin account credentials and the Windows Server DC admin username and password in order to set up AD Connect. AD Connect is a tool from Microsoft that is designed to meet and accomplish your hybrid identity goals. It provides the following features: password hash synchronization, a sign-in method that synchronizes a hash of users to your on-prem AD password with Azure AD. The synchronization includes password hashes. AD Connect is used to synchronize your user accounts, groups, memberships, credential hashes from an on-prem to an AD environment to an Azure environment. For example, if a user changes their password, Azure AD self-service password management, the password is updated back on the on-prem AD DS environment. AD is great at managing the traditional on-prem infrastructure and applications. Azure AD is great for managing user access to cloud applications. You can use both together if you want. To have a purely cloud-based environment, you can then just use Azure AD. Azure AD comes at no cost. It's free. Nice. Of course, the traditional AD server or VM, we will install AD Connect on that, and then of course we will sync with Azure AD. On our lab, again, we'll create an AD DC on-prem. We will install AD Connect, and then of course we'll sync up with Azure Active Directory. So the first phase is to install Active Directory. Then the second phase would be to install AD Connect, and the third phase would be to sync up with Active Directory. I encourage you to go and have a look at the links below. They'll give you a lot of information on the hybrid environment and ways to connect and install. So again, please go and have a look at that. This again is just a broad overview to get you up to grips so that you can learn how to use AD Connect in your environment and hopefully learn how to use this in the real world. So with that being said, let's move over into the lab. Hi, as you can see, I've gone ahead and logged into the portal. So the first thing I want to do is create a resource group by selecting resource groups here, clicking create, and I'm going to go ahead and create this resource group, and I'm just going to call it AD Connect Lab Review and Create. The next thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and create a virtual network. So I'm going to go ahead and create an on-prem network to try and mimic the real world environment. So I'm going to click virtual networks. I'm going to click create. I'm going to put it into that AD Connect lab, and I'm going to give my virtual network a name, calling it on-prem network. I'm going to go next, and what I'm wanting to do is I want to change the subnet mask and IP address. So I'm going to select the IP address. I'm going to change the default subnet mask, and I'm going to just paste it in there. I'm going to call this VM. I'll do it lowercase. I'll call it VM subnet. I'm going to click save. I'm going to scoot over to the security. I'm going to accept the defaults. I'm going to go next, review and create, and I'm going to go away and create this network. What it's going to do, it's going to do a validation, and once the validation has passed, click create. So now we've created our virtual network. The next thing we want to do is we want to create a virtual machine to put in that network. That virtual machine is going to host our Active Directory domain controller. So let's go to virtual machines. Let's click add virtual machine. I'm going to select that AD Connect lab. I'm going to just paste in there. I'm going to call that DC01. I'm going to accept the defaults for now, and I'm just going to give it a name. So I'll call it VS admin, and I'm going to go ahead and type in my password. I'm just going to confirm my password again, and I'm going to go ahead and go next. For the disks, obviously I could use SSD Premium, or I could use the standard storage disks. Obviously, if you want to save on cost, you can select HDD. I'll just keep this as a standard SSD for, like I say, testing purposes. I'm going to go and create a new disk, and this is where we're going to put our Azure, our Active Directory domain controllers. So when we install AD, this is where we're going to throw our schema, and the reason we're going to do that is because we want our schema to be in a safe place. So I'm just going to select standard SSD, and I'm going to just type in there 10. Obviously, you could select standard HDD. That'll bring the costs down. So I'm going to go next, and you can see there's that disk. We'll attach that disk a little bit later. I'm going to go to networking, make sure we're in the right infrastructure, make sure everything was all okay. I'm going to go next for management. I'm going to disable boot diagnostics. I'm going to click advanced, and I'm going to click review and create, because we're not going to be doing any tagging. And what this is going to do now, it's going to go away and create that virtual machine. Once that virtual machine is created, we'll go ahead, log into that virtual machine, and we will install Active Directory and make that our domain controller. Once we've installed Active Directory on that machine, we will go ahead then and actually install AD Connect. And as you can see, it didn't take long to deploy that domain controller. Again, I can go to the notifications icon here, and I can see my progress. I'm going to go ahead and dismiss all of that, and I'm going to go to the resources. The next thing I want to do is I want to connect to my server. So I'm going to click connect. I'm going to download that RDP client. I'm going to download that RDP file, and I'm going to go ahead and open up that file. It's opened up on a desktop, so I'm just going to drag this open and click connect. And then I'm just going to drag this over again, and we can actually log into that server. And as you can see, it's asking us, so I'm going to click yes. And I'm just going to drag it over because it's opened up on another window. So I'll just maximize that, and we'll just wait for that quickly to fire up and log us in. And as you can see, it's in the process of logging us in. It can take a minute or two, so we'll just wait while that logs in. And as you can see, it's gone ahead and fired up. So I'm going to go down to tools. I'm going to select computer management. Now what we want to do is we want to go and add that disk that we set up in Azure when we were building our machine. And this is the disk that we're going to install Active Directory to. So I'm going to click OK, make it an MBR. And I'm going to right mouse click on it, say new simple volume. And I'm going to go ahead and go next, 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 and finish. And this is where we'll install Active Directory 2. So I'm going to close that down. I'm going to go to manage, select roles and features. I'm going to go next, and I'm going to add a role or a feature. I'm going to select my server, and I'm going to select Active Directory Domain Services. I'm going to click add features. I'm going to go next. I'm going to go next, and this is giving me a whole lot of information about Active Directory Domain Services with Azure. That's absolutely fine. I'm going to go next, and I'm going to click restart the server if need be, and click install. And what this is going to do now, it's going to go away and install the prereqs for Active Directory. It's not actually installing Active Directory, it's prepping the DC to become a domain controller. Once this is done, we can then go ahead and install Active Directory. So this can take about a minute or two, so we'll just wait for this quickly to scream away and do its thing. And as you can see, it didn't take long, it installed that. So let's go ahead and promote this DC. So we're not adding a domain controller to existing forest, and we're not adding a new domain control to existing forest. We're going to add a new forest. I'm going to go ahead and paste in my domain name. I'm going to go ahead and click next. Before, Microsoft used to say to you, this needs to be myazure.guru.local, but things have changed with Server 2016 and 2019. We don't need to do that anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and just accept that and go next. And this is going to go away and do some checks. And obviously it's asking me for a password. Just bear in mind, if you have 2008 servers or 2008 R2 or 2012 or 2012 R2 servers, make sure you select those if you have those other domain controllers in your environment. If you don't, you won't be able to connect to them with Active Directory, and you won't be able to sync things up. So I'm going to go ahead and type in a password. And this password is so that I can uninstall Active Directory if I need to. So I'm going to go ahead and go next. This is going to give me a whole lot of information and some warnings about DNS. That's absolutely fine. I'm going to click next. This is going to then take my domain name and truncate it and make it shorter. So anything that's got quite a few characters, what it does, it'll go and truncate that and make it as short as possible. So in my case, it's just going to be called my Azure Guru. You could change this, but I would suggest leave that to avoid confusion. So I'm going to go next. And now this is going to go away and do some other checks again for us. And obviously we want to change this from C to F, because remember we created that drive that we want to install our Active Directory schema onto it. And the reason we do that is in case our virtual machine crashes, we've got our Active Directory on another schema and it's not going to cause any strife. And if something does happen, we can get out of hot water as opposed to the schema being straight on your C drive. This is preference and experience kicking in. Some people are just quite happy to leave it on the C drive, and that's fine as well. It all depends on you. Again, this is just a lab, so I'm not too concerned. I'm going to go next. This is going to give me a whole lot of information about what we're going to do. I'm going to go next. This is going to go away and just validate some checks for us. Once this validation has completed, we will then go ahead and click install, and now we get to install our Azure our DC AD, not Azure Active Directory, sorry, our main Active Directory on the domain controller. So we want to make sure that the prereqs checks have completed, and of course we've got a nice little green checkbox here. I'm not too stressed about the DNS zones, we'll sort that out a bit later. I'm going to go ahead and click install, and now this is going to go away and install Active Directory on the server. And by installing Active Directory on a server, we are making it a domain controller. So once Active Directory has been installed on the server, we will carry on with the lab. Again, this can take a few minutes to install, so I'll just wait while this goes ahead and installs. And as you can see, it's gone ahead, it's installed, and it's now rebooting that server. So we'll wait for that server to reboot, and then we'll actually log back into that domain controller. So we'll just give it a second while that does it. It shouldn't take too long to reboot, and then we can actually see what's going on. So I'm just going to drag this window open and over, and let's go ahead and reconnect to that domain controller again. And we'll just give it a second while our RDPN. I'm just going to minimize the window and drag it over. And as you can see now, it's going ahead and it's installing group policy. It's doing a few bits and pieces to turn the server into a domain controller. Again, this can take about a minute or two. So again, it also depends on what type of disks you're using and what type of environment you're in. So again, we'll just wait for this to quickly do its thing, and then we can carry on. And as you can see, it didn't take too long to install because of the SSD drives. Obviously, if I had the standard drives in, it would take its sweet grandmother's time to get stuff done. So what we're going to do is I'm going to scoot over again to Tools, and I'm going to come down to Active Directory Users and Computers. And this is going to open up Active Directory Users and Computers, and we'll actually see if our domain. So as you can see, now I'm just going to drag this window over a bit, and you can see I've got my domain here, and of course if I go into domain controllers, you can see I have my DC here. So the next thing we want to do is I'm just going to minimize this, because we actually want to move over into Azure. I want to go to Services, Resources, my lab, and then of course I want to go to IP configurations, and then we want to assign that server a static IP address. So I can click on that and go ahead and assign it a static IP. We don't want it a dynamic, because if it is a dynamic IP, what could happen is the IP address could change and we will no longer be able to connect. So I'm going to click Save, and then I'm going to move over again into my virtual network. I'm going to select the on-prem network, and I'm going to go down to DNS servers, and I want to add a custom DNS server here. So what I need to do is I need to go back to my virtual machine. I need to select my DC, and I need to grab my virtual machine's IP address, which is this over here. So I'm going to copy and paste that IP address. Again, I'm going to move over to virtual networks. I'm going to go to the on-prem network. I'm going to go into DNS servers. I'm going to select custom, and I'm going to paste in that IP address, because I don't want to use the Azure provided DNS, because my AD Connect won't work. So I'm going to click Next, and I'm going to go ahead and save that. And now that is saved, I can go back into my server, and we can go ahead and close this down, and I will go ahead and download AD Connect. So I've got the link opened in Notepad, so I'm just going to grab that link in Notepad. I'm going to select copy. I'm going to open up a web browser, and I'll just drag this across so we've got some more real estate. I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to paste this bad boy in there and press enter, and this will take me to the Microsoft website, and I can go ahead and download Microsoft Azure Active Directory Connect. I'm going to go ahead and download this, and I'm going to go ahead and save it, and I'll save it to my desktop. So I'm going to click Save, and that's going to go ahead and save that for me. So once that is saved, I can go ahead and install Azure Active Directory. But before we do that, I just want to minimize this again and go back into my Active Directory and go back to my users. You need to have an account that is a global administrator in order to install AD Connect. So what I'm going to do is, this is my account there, and if you select your account name and you go to assigned roles, you can then go ahead and assign that person that global admin role by clicking this add assignments and selecting the global admin role. You could also type in GL for global, and that'll find it. If I went, for example, and typed in GL, that would go and find it. The reason you don't see it here is because he's been added here. So let's scoot back over to our server, and let's get Active Directory AD Connect working. So again, this is going to install AD Connect. So we'll let this go away and install. Now you need the server admin username and password and an AD Azure account with the credentials to actually sync up to Azure Active Directory. I'm going to go ahead and click Continue. I'm going to use Express settings. I mean, you could use customized settings and select what you want to set up, but in a real world scenario, you'd obviously want to sync everything up. So I'm going to use Express settings, and this is going to go away and use that Express setting. So what I'm wanting to do is actually install Connect to Azure AD. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my go back to my user accounts, and I'm going to select this user, and I'm a little bit lazy, so I'm going to copy this name. I'm going to fire up my server again, and I'm going to paste this name in, and I'm going to paste in his password. and I'm going to go ahead and go next. And this should go away and talk to Microsoft Azure and confirm that I have that global admin account permissions in order to install this domain controller to Active Directory. Now it's asking for my domain name. So obviously my domain name would be, we could go back into our server as we are in, and we could type it in. So I know my domain name is my Azure guru.com vs admin, and I'll go and type in his password, and I would click next. Now this is going to go away and it's going to verify that we have all the correct credentials, and I'm going to go ahead and click install. And what this is going to do now, it's going to go away and install SQL Local Express database. It's going to do a few bits and pieces for us, and if we've got all of our credentials and everything right, we should be able to sync up to our Azure Active Directory. So again, this can take a minute or two for that service to kick in. So we'll just wait while that service kicks in, and then we can carry on with the lab. So it's sort of like hurry up and wait. But if we just wait a little bit, it won't take too long. And as you can see, it's going away there, creating the Azure Active Directory synchronization account. And we need that account in order to sync stuff up. So again, it's more of a hurry up and wait. So if you read at the top underneath configuring, it's doing its thing. So we'll just wait while that does its thing. And as you can see, it's configuring Azure Active Directory sync. So we just need to be a little bit patient. It's a little bit slow today for some reason. Normally it's pretty quick. So as you can see, it's going along. It's adding a whole lot of information and rules to our Azure Active Directory, and it shouldn't take too long now for the sync to complete. So we'll just again hold thumbs and fingers and toes while it syncs across. So it shouldn't take too long to sync up, and then we can carry on with the lab. And as you can see, it's gone ahead and it's synced everything across. So I'm going to exit from there, and I'm going to come to Start, and I'm going to go to Admin Tools, and I'm going to scroll down until I find Active Directory. I'm just going to go ahead and pin this for ease of use to my taskbar, and I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to create an OU over here, and I'm going to call that OU sales, and click OK. I'm going to go ahead and create a new user, and I'll call this user Sandy Lee, and we'll just give her SANDYL, and then obviously we'll give her a password. And I would click next and click finish, and I'll create another user, and there we go. We've created our users, and now let's just minimize this a bit, and I'm just going to drag this over to my other window for now, and I'm going to go into Active Directory, and I'm going to go to users, and as you can see, our on-prem synchronization account was created. So we just need to wait a little bit. So I'll just hold on while this waits so that Azure Active Directory can sync. And all going well, we should see our user Sandy Lee and Billy Bob. And if we do a refresh, it's still thinking about it, so we'll just give it another minute or two, and then we'll hit the refresh button again. As you can see, Active Directory has synced, so I'm just going to move this over, and you can see my users here. And I'm just going to put this to the side over here, and we'll just do a refresh. And you'll see there that Active Directory users have synced. Now I just want to show you something. If you go to Active Directory over here and on AD Connect, and we go configure, we can go ahead and say we want to configure synchronization options. We can click that and go next. This is going to ask for our Azure password, so I'm going to go ahead and throw that in there and go next. And this is going to go along and it's going to verify my credentials. If my credentials were wrong, I'll get that error. And I'll go next again, and this will go away and confirm everything because I typed in my password wrong. And as you can see now, it's examining the domains and it will do a sync up. So again, we could sync to Active Directory. If I go next, I could choose what options I want to sync by selecting select domains and OUs, and I can choose, obviously in a real world you want to sync everything. If you don't see your domain there, you could do a refresh domains as well. I'll go next, and of course I would go next as well, and that would complete that sync, and it should sync those users over into Azure Active Directory. So we have now successfully synced our on-prem AD with our Azure AD, and there are two different types of AD. So you're probably saying, well, when do I use Active Directory and when do I use Active Directory Azure? You'd use Active Directory if you've got an on-prem server, and you would use you'd use a traditional Active Directory for an on-prem server, and if you don't want an on-prem server, then you would use Azure Active Directory. So we'll just wait a minute or two for this to sync. It shouldn't take too long. It should be really quick. And as you can see, it's synced successfully. And if I scroll down here and we do a refresh, our users would soon start populating across there. By default, it can take a good 10 or 15 minutes for Azure Active Directory to sync up with our Active Directory domain and vice versa as well. So again, this is just giving you an idea of how to install Azure Active Directory Connect so that you could connect your traditional domain controller to the Azure domain services. So again, like I say, if you've got any questions, let me know. I'd like to thank you for subscribing to my YouTube channel. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.